welcome to this evening's webinar. Before we just get into the content, I just wanted to run through a few housekeeping bits. So the webinar is going to be recorded, which will also be the text that you type, so any questions that you type, as well as the recording. So I just wanted to let people know about that. There's 3 club sport managers on line, so myself, which is Heidi Bradley, Natalie Kavanagh-Clark, who is going to handle the questions a bit later on, and also Nick, who is our tech guy for this evening. The format of tonight includes a mixture of both sharing some findings from a research project that was undertaken by England Athletics, as well as a short presentation from the S Factor Academy. And I'd like to thank Steph for coming in and doing that for us. Really looking forward to hearing that shortly. If you have any questions throughout the session, if you can type them into the box at the bottom, and then we'll manage those throughout the session. So we might pop them up at a certain time that's appropriate, or we might wait to the end and talk through everything. Nick, if you are here, if you can flip on a couple of slides, that would be great. Finally, thank you. At the end of the session, there will be a really short survey. If you're able to stay on and just help us complete that, it'll just help us in the future understand what type of things that you might want from us and help impact our future work. So, as I said, the session is built on some aims that you may have already seen when you booked on. So we're going to learn about some of the reasons why young people actually like athletics as a sport, as well as find out why they might drop out, looking at some research that we've done through England Athletics. And then we're going to pass you over to the club, who's going to share some practical knowledge and ideas about how we might tackle these issues within the your own club setting. If you have any ideas yourself or any things that you've done within your club that you'd want to share, then please feel free to do that. That would be absolutely brilliant. And you can do that during the questions section at the end. So that would be great. If we just move on to a slide, that'd be great. Thank you very much. So this table provides some information using the Power of 10 website on the number of registered performances against age groups in 2018 and 2017, and for us it highlighted some concerns, particularly around the under 15s and under 17s age group, particularly the under 15s, which shows a reduction of over 600 performances between 2017 and 2018, and within the under 17s a 3% decline. We've also found out through our statistics that there's a significant churn of athletes coming in and leaving the sport, and the highest being around the 15 to 17 age group. So out of an analysis of over 24,000 athletes that took part in 2016, our research revealed that 43% of them didn't actually compete within 2017. So that was something that concerned us greatly. And we commissioned a piece of research between July and December 2018 to understand some of the reasons why athletes might be dropping out, and to have a look at some solutions that might help us to address that. So the research was basically focused on an in-depth interview of around 30 athletes, as well as a quantitative survey that covered around 500 others. So quite a big range of people that we spoke to. If we can ping on another slide, that would be great. So in terms of why people take part, it was good to see that most people enjoy the competitive nature of the sport. They found that it was about improving and getting better, so that personal development side, around confidence that the sport provides and helps them feel good. And the last one is that people just want to come along and have fun. And then finally, we looked at the reasons why they might be dropping out. If we can flip on a slide, thank you. A lot of it was around time constraints from studying, which obviously you probably understand because of exam time. 30% said due to injury, and then some of the smaller percentages were around training required too much time, and I think some of that was around that there's maybe been an increase in the amount of training, but some of it was maybe more social pressures and more areas that they want to or areas of the life that they want to get involved with. 17% said that training had got boring, and 22% had just said that the performance wasn't really improving, and that was why they kind of lost interest and started to drop out. So we've had a look at these, and we've shared this information obviously with Steph, and we're now going to introduce the club, and they're going to talk about what they've been doing. Can we move on? Okay, Nat, are you okay to speak and introduce the club?
Hi everybody, so I'm Natalie, the club support manager. Just a very quick introduction because I'm mindful of my background noise. So Steph Hanson, who's the chair and welfare officer from S Factor Academy, has kindly agreed to share good practice for the club this evening. The club was founded in 2010 and caters for athletes from 7 years old to adults, and they're based in South East London and train at Ladywell. The club actually won the Inclusion Award within London this year and the National Award last year, and they've been really, really great at just showcasing some of the work that they've been doing. So I'll hand over to Steph now to share some of that good practice. Thank you, Steph.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Heidi. Hi, everyone. So, as Natalie said, my name's Steph. I joined S Factor Academy a good sort of 5 years ago as their chair and welfare officer. And one of the things that struck me about the club is that, first and foremost, our USP is that we're not just an athletics club. We position ourselves as an academy because one of the things that appeals, I feel, to teams is that there's something additional than just core athletics. It depends on who you're trying to appeal to, but we find that having more strings to our bow than just being, an athletics club can sometimes help with retention numbers and engagement in general. So the history of the club, as Natalie alluded to, we set up the club in 2010. Actually, it was an ex-GB athlete, Lisa Miller, who saw the gap in that area of and that was where it all began. They decided at that time that we wanted to provide wider services than just athletics, which would include things such as, work experience, being able to do your Duke of Edinburgh. But we'll come on to that a bit later. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the club itself, we've got roughly 250 members in terms of volunteers and athletes and just general stakeholders. In terms of the athletes themselves who come in, week in, week out for training, we've got roughly 40 to 50 seniors, and then I'd say about 30 inclusive, so the disability team, and then the rest of that will be juniors. But as most of you can attest to, it's very much a cyclical type of attendance. Some are summer athletes, some sort of lose interest as they get, they move on in school and then they decide to come back. So it's a wavering number, but those are the general numbers. And what we find is that across the board, you'll find if you have a connection with your coach or a connection with the volunteering staff, and you can develop that early on, that's something that tends to lead to more retention as the athlete goes through the club and sort of graduates from one division to the next. And as you can see, our mission generally is to try and make sports and athletics training in general fun, to instill discipline, but by and large to make sure that whatever the athlete needs, they get, whether that be support in a pastoral sense from the coach, or whether they need some form of, welfare intervention. So we're very much flexible in terms of adapting to the athlete's needs. We try to build a one-to-one with every athlete that crosses our path and make sure that we're very much involved in the athlete's life as well as their parents. Can we go to the next slide? So just to go through the bullets here, and you have to apologize, I have to apologise in advance. I can't actually see the slides that well. I'm having to look on my laptop and on my phone, but I'm just going to take you through the bullets at high level. There are a number of ways that we, in general, try to make training fun and engaging. We have a buddy system, because obviously a lot of athletes that get involved in sports, they do it for extracurricular reasons, and with some of our own athletes, many of them are, they're recommended, or they get fed to the club from alternative provision schools, or they have problems in school and they're not integrating very well, and therefore either the PE teacher or their parents, they get in touch with us and they get referred. So we have a buddy system, which means that as soon as the athlete joins, if they're joining at sort of a young teenage stage, let's say 12 or 13, then they are paired with somebody immediately. So for the first few sessions, they have somebody as a go-to. But across the board, we have buddy systems, but I'm just talking about in terms of the senior division itself. We play music as we warm up, not for the training itself, but we find that it relaxes the athletes and it sort of aids to a fun environment. We have a rewards program, which I'll also come on to a bit later, and that includes things such as, you know, if an athlete is consistent in their attendance, we may reward them with vouchers for decathlon, or we may, give them a water bottle branded, or a sports bag. There are a number of prizes that we have in our pot for the rewards program, but also it's just an ad hoc scheme as well. So if there's sort of, a particular athlete that's tried very hard, not necessarily gone to lots of competitions, but we can see that their attitude to training is positive and they have a positive influence on others, we try to reward them in that way. Moving down the bullets, we also involve parents and carers. And then we also, as you all know, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, I think it has 4 strands to that. One is volunteering, and the other that we offer is obviously the physical side of it as well. So I think the others are, a retreat, and then the last one, I think, for the gold standard is where you go away on a residential. We don't touch those areas, but certainly for the volunteering side of things and the physical side of things, of course, they can always come to the club and fulfil that. And we try to reach out to local schools and sort of sell the club on that basis as well, because a lot of athletes, especially if you're coming onto your sort of GCSEs, it's really important to try and get those things under your belt. And then last but not least, we are soon aiming to pilot a mentor/life coaching program. And this was, it's been in the works for a while, but we've never quite been able to know what the take-up will be, which is why we're starting it as a pilot. And the objective behind this is so that we can sort of formalise the welfare aspect of what we provide to athletes. Many of them are at the stage where they're going to be leaving school and, they're thinking about their careers. Some of them might be on the cusp of leaving the club or leaving athletics, and, having a positive role model or someone that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of might be the difference between staying with the club and leaving. Okay, so that's just high level, but I'll go into the bullets one by one now and just talk a little bit more. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I mentioned that we have the buddy system. I don't know if you can see a couple of the images there, but what we found with particularly the girls is that for some reason, obviously you've got the drop-off when you get to teenagers, but we found that in that demographic you have a further drop-off rate in girls in particular. And one of the things that I know that some of the coaches did recently is that we ran some outreach sessions in local schools, and they were particularly targeted at young girls, probably between the ages of sort of, I think, 13 and 15. And the objective of those programs was to, I suppose, sell the benefits of staying active and, you know, making sports part of your life rather than being part of a club because you want to compete. And I know it might sound trite, but we try to sell it on the basis of, you know, physical health. You know, obviously you'll stay healthy. You will, you know, we appeal to the vanity in the young teens, and so we said obviously you'll look great, you'll feel great. And yeah, we had a good turnout in the schools themselves, and then obviously the objective was so that they would join the main hub once those programs within the schools ended. We had quite a good take-up rate. Obviously, at some point, you know, athletes may decide to leave anyway, but in terms of the take-up from those particular outreach programs, we found that it was really useful. And so outreach in general is a really good way of reaching out to teens and young girls if you can get local schools to partner with you. I touched on the music. As I said before, we try to do this at warm-up, and we will probably play a bit of music when they're stretching at the end. During the actual training sessions, obviously, we try to focus a bit more, but the coaches have said that it just makes all the difference. I think it adds to a relaxed environment. All of our coaches are relatively young as well, so none of them are, you know, pretty, you know, old school and, you know, military type sergeants. They're very laid back, and as long as you're there to focus, you can have a little bit of fun with it as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said before, that the main aim of our training sessions is so that we do it in a sort of a fun environment, but we also do need to instill discipline in our athletes. So one of the things I mentioned before was that we try to use sort of carrot rather than stick. And what we try to do is not only reward for good athletic prowess, and also, you know, efforts and your attitude. We also try to reward academic achievement, because being an academy, we're trying to give them a holistic experience, and athletics is just one way to sort of feed into that, but we're trying to develop them and reward life skills. If they show improvement in their academic work as well, we will give them sort of monetary rewards. And as you can see on the slide, we've got a sliding scale depending on what level you are in your education. We also give them shout outs on social media so that they feel sort of valued and that the team is rooting for them to do well. And as you can see at the bottom of that slide, there's ad hoc ways to reward athletes as well. So it's not just about, you know, the best in class. You know, it will be, I guess, those who have shown that they are, you know, working hard and they're not sort of letting their schoolwork suffer, but at the same time, they're doing well in athletics as well. We try to reward them either way so that they don't think it's an either or. And as you can see, we go right the way up to sort of degree age as well. So, you know, as you can see, if you attain your degree, but you're also thinking of, for example, going on to your master's, you'd be well into your early 20s at that stage. And we will still, you know, the engagement obviously still needs to be there, but we will still help to reward you on getting your degree and also give you a bit of a bump start for your postgrad course. And that, in a roundabout way, is an incentive for the athlete to continue their journey, still remaining engaged with the club. And the kids know that this is part of the program. So I mean, it's not going to be the difference between staying and leaving the club, but it definitely helps because we try to run the club as a family, as cliche as that sounds, but it really is. At the end of this week, we're hosting an awards event. We do that annually, and it's basically just an awards evening where we give trophies in all sorts of different categories. You know, Spirit Award, most consistent athletes. Obviously, you've got your top track athlete, top field athlete, but we do that so that they actually feel really valued, you know, and we try to invite, you know, local stakeholders as well as key figures within our governing bodies like England Athletics, and also from the world of sport. So this year we're very lucky to have Linford Christie, who's going to be joining us. We've also got others who are in sports but not necessarily athletics, such as Mark Bright, who's a former footballer, if any of you follow football. Because it's not just about, obviously we're an athletics club, but it's about sport and just instilling values and what sport can do for you generally. And you sometimes find that a lot of the athletes in your club are, they're juggling more than one sport. We have kids who swim on a Wednesday and then come for athletics training on a Saturday. We also have footballers who actually they're on the cusp of deciding whether they want to try and make it in athletics or follow their football dreams. And we have one alumni athlete who actually did go on and become a Premiership footballer. Won't give any names, but yeah, what you find is that athletics is still key to remaining fit, and so footballers tend to, in their off season or in their downtime, they are athletes essentially. That's what keeps them strong and that's what keeps them fit. So yeah, essentially motivation and consistency, that really feeds into retaining young athletes because they feel rewarded and there's something to work towards. Next slide, please. And yeah, the last two bullets from the first page, I spoke about Duke of Edinburgh Award and then our mentor and life coaching. For the Duke of Edinburgh, we did consider at one stage actually becoming a provider, but I think the timing and the capacity just weren't right at the time, and we're still considering it because I think that would be an even bigger pull if we were able to provide the actual certificate and accreditation itself. But as you know, it's not easy to get volunteers on board, and the ones that we do have, which we're very lucky to have, they work flat out as it is. So it would require somebody to oversee that program as a dedicated role, and at the moment we can't do that, but we would love to be able to do that at some point. So in the meantime, what we do is we try to publicise that, come to S Factor, you should be able to, meet the requirements for the physical side of the award and also the volunteering side of the DOE award. We've got a couple of athletes who have already gone through us to do their Duke of Edinburgh. In the top right-hand corner, you can see the junior section, and the little athlete that's sort of stooping down next to the coach. He was doing his Duke of Edinburgh, and he was actually an athlete. He's one of our long-distance athletes in the seniors, and he decided to take a few weeks off of training so that he could volunteer in the junior division. And some of the other rewards that we provide or that we hand out to athletes is support for warm weather training. Now, warm weather training isn't open to everybody in the club. It's supposed to motivate seniors to dedicate themselves, try to get their personal bests, and if they reach a certain level or they get certain objectives, then we will offer them the chance to go to, I think we've been to Portugal in the last couple of years. They come with their parents or a chaperone, and it's usually during the Easter break. So we go to warm weather training once a year for about a week, and only those who have shown real progress or potential to sort of compete at either county or national level will be invited to do that. And it does spur them on, and obviously who wouldn't want to go and train in warm weather. So, and if there's ever a bar, we don't fund the whole thing, but if there's a bar to finances, we will help to contribute, because we don't think that finances should ever be a bar to an athlete achieving their full potential. So we have subsidised warm weather training for a number of athletes. And then with the mentor and life coaching, again, the objective there is to ensure that, you know, young teams, anyone really, but we find that it's usually the teams that have, you know, issues or have welfare problems that they might need to sort of speak to somebody, maybe not the coach, but maybe somebody who's slightly detached from the club. They might be embarrassed about the problem, or they might genuinely just need some advice or confidence training or confidence building or, some sort of guidance. And we think that this program, if we do implement it in the right way, will really help. We're hoping actually not just to focus on the athletes, we're going to try and roll it out to the volunteers as well, because I feel that, not to go off on a tangent, but I think volunteer retention is obviously a key issue for clubs as well. So we're looking at it from both angles, and I'm hoping that it really does take off. And yeah, in that way we'll be able to retain teams from 11, 12, 13 right the way up. And one thing I wanted to also highlight when I was talking about the awards that we are running, the hosts for that and all the volunteers that help on the night are previous athletes. They come, and this just goes to show, it's a testament of the relationship that we maintain with former athletes. Many of them stay engaged, they come back, they help. One of the alumni athletes, when she's on her university break, she'll come and she'll sit at reception and she'll, volunteer in whatever way she can. And that's because, you've developed that relationship. We know her parents, and it's her and her sister who both volunteer for us regularly. And so, yeah, it's good to maintain that relationship, because you'll also find that it pays dividends when they get a bit older. They might come back and volunteer, who knows. So I think that's it, really. It's, there's a number of ways that you can tackle this issue. We found that making sure that the club can offer a wide array of support, not just core athletics, is the key to retaining teams. And hopefully it will work for you guys too. Any questions?
Um,
a couple of questions have come up for you. Do you want me to read them out if you're struggling to read?
Yeah, so on my screen, I can't see anything. I tried to log on using my phone, but it didn't work, unfortunately. So I can't see what you can see.
So I've had a question. I think it was relating to the Duke of Edinburgh, where it was. Is it mainly for sprinters? I'm guessing for the for the trips away.
So no. So for the Duke of Edinburgh, I think there are 4 strands to that. The first one is just physical, so it can be any sport that you get involved in. The second limb is, and this might not be in any order, but the second limb is volunteering. So we provide those two. The third.
Sorry, Steph. It was for the warm weather training. Sorry. Somebody else has just replied, just saying it was for the warm weather training for the sprinters.
Right, okay. Yeah, I think you're right, actually. We probably could, if the question is whether we could use the warm weather training as one of the limbs of Duke of Edinburgh, we could do that, yeah. Okay. Technically speaking, it probably falls within that category of a residential or a retreat. Yeah, good point.
And then any suggestions for aiding transition from fun-focused under-11s to more performance-focused over-11s?
Yes, actually, what we do, and we don't highlight this so much on the website because it's not an official transition, but we have an intermediate group, and that's the transition between quite advanced juniors, those that show real skill, real talent, and they're slightly, juniors grow at all different rates. I mean, all kids do, and so do the seniors. But you do tend to find when they get to around sort of 9, 10, some of them shoot up and they are just that much faster, that much more, agile and able than some of the other younger ones. And so what we try to do is the coaches will look out for particular sort of potentials or athletes that show skill, or they're just more adept at learning certain techniques, and they will feed them through to our intermediate section, and that is between the age of 11 and 14, because we find that as a group, it's better for them to have almost segued into the seniors, because once you do get to the seniors, it's a completely different type of training. As you know, they'll be focusing on individual events, whereas with the juniors, it's, as you said, fun, it's, you know, very much a quad kid approach, which is just learning to, you know, the essentials of jumping and throwing and sprinting. And so what you'll find is the juniors go into the intermediate section, and then they will start to transition slowly. And there's only about, I don't know, there's about 6 or 7 in our intermediate group, because clearly an 11-year-old is not going to be able to train with a 16, 17-year-old sprinting. They'll be poles apart. And so we found that a little segue group is really useful, and it builds up their confidence as well. It's almost like, you know, going to secondary school for the first time. You know, suddenly where you were once the oldest in your division and you were winning all your races, you would then get to the seniors, and then you could be really demoralised if you found that you just were not at the same level as the older kids. So we do have an intermediate group. It's not official, but we try to do that just so that it helps the transition for the athletes.
Excellent. Hopefully that's answered your question. Another one what's come through. I'm just bringing them up on the screen now. I don't know if that's reading better for you.
Yes, I can see.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So we've got Keith who's asked, where do you get most of your coaches from?
Oh, good question. So the majority of the coaches at the outset of the club were very much word of mouth, and because Lisa Miller, who set the club up, is a former GB athlete herself, she knew many coaches just from the industry and having competed. So a lot of the coaches were sort of legacy friendships, and, you know, I think she did a stint at England Athletics, so she had lots of connections in sport generally. And we also use the Mayor of London website. But I have to admit, the London Mayor's website, we tend to be lucky with volunteers for the back office function, the support functions, as opposed to coaches. It's been very difficult to get coaches through the Mayor's website and through, I think we posted on Indeed as well. So it's word of mouth. It's, you know, we do go to colleges sometimes and try to do, well, we've gone a couple of times just to post on their notice boards and also to give a talk, because I think you find if you've got sort of first year BTEC sports students, they wouldn't mind volunteering just to build up their portfolio of experience. But we could be better at doing that, I have to admit. But those are some good avenues to find coaches, but it is a struggle, I'll admit.
Lovely. Next one. How do you identify athletes locally?
So I mentioned that we had a couple of outreach programs at schools, and what we've found is that sometimes, even without a grant-funded program in place, those schools do ask if our coaches would be willing to come back and run additional sessions, and then the school is willing to pay the coaches specifically for their time. But other than that, it's word of mouth. A lot of the athletes invite their friends. What we have been trying to do, and we've been successful in a couple of years, but we didn't do it in 2018, is go into sports days. And so we put together a list of secondary schools, and we called up and found out when their sports days were going to be taking place, and we just went and talent spotted. And a couple of our good athletes have been found in this way.
We've got another question which is on the screen.
Yeah, how do you include young athletes that may not be academic? So coming back to the awards event and also our reward program generally, a coach is always able to reward athletes that they think deserve it. So you can get a reward just because of your attitude to sport, your attitude to your fellow athletes. If they've got, for example, let's just say in the junior division, if they see that there's one particular athlete who's always, good at listening and encouraging the others to not muck about and listen when the coach is talking, they will raise an alert to the rest of us on the committee, and we will try and reward them in some way or let their parents know, and they'll get a nod at the awards evening. Other than that, we have a reward scheme. So apart from what I showed you on the slide, we have one of those, almost like a loyalty card. And if you get a certain amount of stars stamped, I think you need to attend 8 sessions, you'll get a freebie. So I mentioned that, you know, sometimes you can get a voucher, but you can also get a branded water bottle. I think we had bags, drawstring bags, I think pens as well, just small things, just small tokens, but yeah, that has worked. Although that has faded in recent years, just because nobody was interested in the pens anymore. They just were interested in the vouchers and the money. But yeah, we look to reward athletes, not just for physical skills at all. It's definitely attitude, and everybody gets a look in when it comes to the awards evening.
Lovely. And then the next question, do you have a relationship with Kent AC?
We are trying, and we've been talking about it for years. Obviously, we occupy the same space, and I've been trying to get a meeting in the diary with Ellie Brown, I think, who is chair of the England Athletics Regional Council, I believe, but she's also, you know, she's a member of Kent AC. I can't remember her role. So we're trying to, and we've always wanted to build some sort of partnership, because they're clearly geared at running, and I think that they're interested, or their demographic is more on the senior side. So it would be good if we could partner in some way, but obviously there's an overlap, so we'd have to look at ways of working together without sort of cannibalizing a factor through working with them. But we would love to, yeah, we'd love to. How much engagement do you get from the parents? Yeah, so yes, that's correct. The relationship is predominantly with the athletes, especially when they get to the older ages, so from about, I'd say, 14, 15 onwards, when they can make their way to and from training alone. The parents do tend to step out of the picture, but we try to involve the parents in a number of ways. So there are various WhatsApp groups, the dreaded WhatsApp, yeah. We've got a general sort of communications, almost like a broadcasting WhatsApp group, but we also have different WhatsApp groups for the different divisions. And, you know, it's very fluid, dynamic, instant, and any parents can ask any questions at any time. They also have coaches' numbers as well, obviously, so if there's going to be, no training, training's cancelled, or if there's, something at Parliament Hill, or there's the thing, what do they do on a Sunday, where it's a 5K, I've forgotten what it's called now, but things like that, things that are outside of the training sessions, parents do keep in contact with the individual coaches through WhatsApp. And then we also have sort of, at the beginning of each training session, we will have almost like a regroup session where the coaches will invite athletes and their parents just to talk about the objectives ahead, which competitions the club will be entering athletes into, what the aims are, and just a bit of a pep talk. Be punctual. You'll get out as much as you put in. If you've got any concerns, do contact me or welfare or whatever. So we try to have regular, sort of standardized catch-ups, but then we also have the more sort of ad hoc, fluid and dynamic conversation via WhatsApp. And they know who the welfare officer is. They know I'm always available. I'm not always on track, but there's two of us actually. There's me, who does more of the sort of back office aspect of welfare, making sure that we've got the policies and procedures in place. And then we've got a welfare officer who's on the ground at each training session with a big welfare sign on her back. It's part of her uniform. So everyone knows who to speak to if there are any issues or concerns during training. But yeah, that's the predominant way that we stay in contact with the parents.
Lovely.
What facilities do you have for training the under 11s and over 11s? We largely rely on the facilities that we have at Ladywell Arena. It's a fully serviced track. We don't actually have many, things like steeplechase and all of the really, high-skilled events. We wouldn't take advantage of those, although those facilities are there. So, we use the track as any other, I guess, sports arena would be used. We have sort of equipment that we lock away. Maybe I'm not answering the question very well, but I mean, what exactly do you mean by facilities for under 11s as opposed to over 11s? So if the person can elaborate a bit more. Well, one thing we can do, while you're elaborating on the question, I can talk a little bit about how we differentiate between the types of, equipment that we do use. So one of the differences, for example, is during the winter, we make sure that the juniors train inside. So we have a sports hall sessions, and we use things like cones, bean bags, Nerf howlers. And when it comes to the seniors, they train outside come winter, spring, summer or autumn. And, obviously they're using more advanced equipment because they're of an age where that's appropriate. But yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question very well, but I think that's what you meant. Is that the last question?
I'm just having a quick look now. I was going to say, Maggie, has that answered your question? Would you, if not, we could potentially take you off mute. I tell you what, I'll bring Maggie's up here. It's just
okay. One thing I didn't include, which I should have done, and I feel ashamed for not having done so, is just in our disability group, because obviously seniors fall into that category as well. In our disability group, we have modified equipment so that they are able to use it. We've got a couple of racing wheelchairs, and we have, equipment that is easy for disabled athletes to use. So that's one of the other differentiators. Oh, I see. So we have a sports hall only in the winter and the grass track in the summer, but it's hard for the over 11s to be interested in the quad kids. Yeah, so I think we're probably lucky in this respect because we do have, I don't know, is it asphalt? I don't know what the actual material is for usual tracks, but we have an actual track. We don't have a grass track. And yeah, the over 11s don't, they don't train with the quad kids at all. It's senior training, so they're getting, coached in sprint hurdles, and all the events up, from 100 up to probably 800, I think, and then a distance section as well. So we do divide the different divisions and the type of training that each division receives.
Brill, that's great. I'll bring up this next question, and Maggie, hopefully that's answered yours. If you want to give us a thumbs up, if that's helped.
So the athletic comps, which ones do you do? Which ones do you participate in? And do you do youth division league? And do your athletes enter county champs? Or is it just about participation? Oh, no, it's not just about participation. Obviously, it's important to participate and feel valued and get the reward from the sport, regardless of whether you compete. But the objective of most of our athletes is to compete. They do want to compete. Unfortunately, it does appear that we've got a huge number of athletes that don't register to compete with us, which is it's a shame. The coaches do try and drive home that you get that much more motivation when you've competed against others, and regardless of how well you've done, it feeds your motivation for the next competition. And we have found that there have been certain athletes that didn't think that they wanted to compete. They've competed, and then they've gone away, done some training, and now they're in the top 10, top 5, and I'm talking in particular our long distance group. We've seen such amazing progress in that group in particular, and we've had a few county level athletes as a result of the ongoing drive to compete. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Sorry, I forgot the name of what they did at the weekend. It's parkrun, I think it is. where you literally just, it's outside of training, but you'll find that the coaches still try to, you know, encourage athletes to have their own separate sort of drills and training so that they're, you know, prepared when they come back to the sessions and they put the work in outside of the club. So at the moment we compete in Kent County Championships for the long distance runners, LICC, the London Interclub Challenge. In most of them actually, there's the London Youth Games, which we have represented, I think, Lewisham, but you have to represent your county. So we haven't been able to apply as a club, but some of our kids are applying on behalf of their counties. None of them are at English schools at the moment, though. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten anybody at that level yet this year.
And I think, Steph, that's the last one which I've scrolled through to highlight.
Right. Okay.
Is there any more questions before we move on, everyone? There's a question about funding. All right, somebody's just highlight. Sorry, yeah, I've missed Keith's out. Let me just bring that up onto the screen. Apologies, Keith. You should have it in front of you now.
Keith Clark. So where is the funding coming from for the awards and the subsidies? So we're quite fortunate in that we don't get grant funding per se for any of this, but we get a huge amount of donations. But we also have a pot where we just sort of hive away whatever surplus we make from the subs each week. And we basically save for those events because we see them as key to building morale. It's almost, we see it as an overhead, one of the running costs of the club. Without that, you know, I think, you know, there would be very little in terms of bringing everyone together. So there's only kind of one or two main events we have, which are club-wide. We have our AGM, and we have sort of a thank you to the volunteers, sort of a Christmas meal, and then we have the awards, which is to really celebrate the athletes. And we put money away for that, and we do that by the subs that come through each week. And sometimes we can get funding for it if we can, but we don't necessarily get that every year. And we also just, for example, we're running a raffle, and you'll be surprised at how much the community is willing to just put their hands in their pockets. So a lot of the parents will reach out to their corporate groups, or they will spread the word, you know, to small businesses in the area that don't mind, you know, getting a bit of, you know, not advertising, but, you know, they will get recognised if their logo and if they're seen as sponsors of the event. So we've got numerous raffle prizes that have just been donated to us. So yeah, we rely on donations, but we also rely on goodwill. So the venue, for example, the venue for this year's award is going to be a Bonus Pastor, which is a school we've had a long relationship with because we ran outreach sessions at that school. And we just developed a really good relationship with the head teacher. And ever since, they've offered us the hall in order to use it for our awards. So yeah, we've been quite lucky. It's just reaching out and seeing what you can get from the community.
I think that's the last question.
Right. Okay.
I just want to check you can all hear me. Just somebody stick the thumb up because I can't hear any of you lot. Somebody's typing. Super, thank you. Right, okay, I just want to wrap up then. Thanks everybody for listening in, and massive thank you to Steph for sharing all that knowledge and experience. And thanks all for your questions as well, because that was great. The